Hey, what's going on everybody? I got something really interesting to show you today. But before we continue, you should know that Dehancer reached out to me and provided a license for this review. However, they do not get to see this video before they upload, and all opinions are my own. If you want to check out Dehancer for yourself, the link will be in the description below. So without further ado, let's begin. This is the first thing you see when you open Dehancer Desktop, and I think this is what distinguishes them from just being a plugin. We got a sorting system being implemented here. So what we want to do first, we want to find our folder where all the photos are stored. And you can see all the photos in that folder. You can give them a rating, you can sort them by name, by newer first, older first, all that jazz. Pretty cool. So the folder I'm going to be using is this one, where I've already selected some of the photos that I want to edit. You select the photos that you want to edit, and then you right click and you can add 9 images to a new project. You would add that project, give it a name, and click OK. And you can see that a new project has been created with all the images you've selected. Or alternatively, if you don't want to go through the hustle of creating a new project, you can go to your folder with all the photos. You can select the photos you want to edit and click enter. And it will get you to the editing tab where you can work your magic and edit your photos. However, you should know that if for whatever reason, whether the power shuts off or you accidentally close the program, when you go back to the program and you open that folder, you will not have a project created automatically with all the photos that you've selected previously. So in my mind, that would be great to see kind of like a quick project being created automatically and would be named something like recently edited or something. But in my case, these are the photos that I want to edit. I'm going to select all of them and either right click and click edit, or alternatively, just click enter. And right off the bat, you can see that on your left-hand side, you can see your film presets, snapshots, which these are very cool. I'm going to explain to you what they mean later. Then you can show or hide your panels down below. On the right, get your before and after selection. Then you can quick zoom, get access to your inspector. In this case, it can be either histogram, waveform, or parade. I usually use waveform. This is just more convenient for me. And on the right side, you can see that we have our raw settings where you manipulate your exposure, shadow bias, and all the settings down below. We're going to get to them a little bit later, but for now, I want you to look at what we have down below here. And down here we have is what's called a film strip with all the photos that you have in your project. And the one thing that I want to point out is that if I accidentally included a photo that I did not want to include, or I want to go back to my sorting tab and add a photo to this film strip and continue editing, there's no option for you to do that. I just really wish that they added this function to quickly just remove photos from your film strip or add them alternatively. But anyway, let's just edit something. Let's have some fun. We're gonna go to this photo. I think I like this setting. I like this deer in the middle. First things first, I'd like to select my preset to give my image the overall look. And this is kind of like the heart of what Dehancer is. So the very first thing I would do, I would select a preset. I would go for something like Kodak Supra 100. Right out the bat, you can see that this image is already looking pretty good. However, I want you to look at what happened on the right-hand side. And what happened is basically when you click on a certain preset, you would see that certain sliders have been already moved in either direction. And here's the thing that I don't particularly like, because you see, if you're familiar with Dehancer, in the plugin version of this software, we used to have film presets, but we used to also have just our film stocks. And the difference is when you click on the preset, you will have such things as vignette, bloom, halation, or grain being applied. And these things in my particular workflow are the finishing touches of every editing session in my case. So alternatively, with something like just film stocks, it would only apply print and a film profile, and nothing else would be manipulated with. I just find myself, whenever I choose a preset, I would just go ahead and manually click off halation, film grain, all of that jazz. So the way I like to work with images, I would go to my print, I would set exposure to 0, just to keep it as neutral as possible. The very first thing that you have that is kind of different in this program from when it used to be just the plugin version, and that is called a raw setting. You can choose your raw processor. I'm really not sure what it is. And before I forget, there's going to be a lot of settings that I don't even touch. But what I'd really like to see for some of the settings, like for example, I don't know what shadow bias is, okay? But I'd love to know what that is. And instead of going back and reading the manual, I would really love to just hover my cursor over it and kind of like get this window pop up that would explain what that setting is, what that's for. And yeah, that would just be great for people who don't know what they're doing, kind of like a quick introduction to a certain tool. I would really love to see that. But anyway, the very first thing that I'd like to do is drop down the exposure just a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit. I think this looks okay. We can work with that. White balance, we're gonna choose it from as shot to custom in order for us to be able to manipulate it. Maybe we'll give it a bump up in temperature, just gonna warm it up a little bit. Tint, we're gonna go down a little bit more green, just like that. And I think I'm pretty happy with that. Shadow bias, again, I don't know what that is, so I'm not gonna touch that. Boost, not really sure what that is. Maybe that's a contrast adjustment. Oh no, that's something else. Again, I don't know what that is. I'm just not gonna touch that. Local contrast, sounds complicated. I don't know what local contrast is. I know what contrast is, but not local contrast. I'm gonna leave that at 0. Local tone map, not sure. And sharpness, I'm keeping that at 0. If anything, I love my photos to be less sharp than they already are. I'm not adding any sharpness here, so I'm gonna close this down because I'm done with this particular window. Now, the next tool is interesting. If we select this tool and we wanna get our horizon line in order, right? Just kind of like adjust it, align it so it looks good. And I'm just gonna go over that just for the sake of demonstration. I'm gonna click enter. Can you see what's weird about this picture? Is that the corners, the blank corners, are not being filled automatically. And for me personally, I would really love to see a checkbox to kind of like automatically zoom in the picture to compensate for the crop in and for these corners over here. I'm pretty sure that's the thing they're going to implement a little bit later into the software. However, at this time, there's no such option. So whenever you're going to be rotating anything, the crop in isn't just going to automatically compensate for the corners. The next thing we're going to do is our source window, color space. Don't really mess around with this. Always keep it at sRGB or whatever it is set to. Some of these things, I'm not really sure what I'm doing because I think raw settings, you manipulate the image as it was shot because it kind of like pulls out the metadata and allows you to more organically change the settings as opposed to the source. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. But since I already did my exposure adjustments and my temperature and everything, I'm just gonna leave it as is and not touch it. The very next thing you have is the film type and profile, and you can also manipulate push and pull if you want to. And it's kind of like the same thing as this. So the next thing, film developer. Here we can manipulate our contrast boost, gamma correction, color separation, color boost. I'm just gonna go ahead and maybe add a little bit more contrast. Just like this is fine, okay? Gamma correction, again, I don't know what that is. Just gonna leave it at 0. Color boost, maybe a little bit of a color boost. Maybe like look at 10, that looks good. Let's see before and after. Before and after. Before and after. Film compression is kind of like similar to curves, and it's a very handy tool. I use it all the time. And for example, in this photo, it can be especially beneficial for kind of like compressing some of the highlights that I have right here that are feeling a little bit more electric in this area. The impact is pretty much the intensity of the effect, and the white point, I'm just gonna take this and kind of like manipulate it in the way, and you can already see in the left that the highlights are being compressed a little bit, and you can see that effect being applied to the sand in the middle as well. So tonal range, I'm not really sure what that is. Probably the effective range of the mask itself that is kind of like telling this effect like, hey, this is where you need to initiate, this is what you need to manipulate. I don't really touch that. So color density is interesting. From what I understand, for what I've heard, it might actually be wrong, but when it comes to film, colors in film can't really be bright and saturated at the same time. But right now, and I don't know why, and I might be doing something wrong, and I go back and read the manual or something, I want to like increase or decrease the effect of that. I don't really see that anything is being changed in the frame. Usually you would see like something colorful being dropped down in luminance, but I don't really see anything being manipulated here, which again, I might be doing something wrong, but that's what color density is. It basically drops the luminance values of colors, making them more dense. So the next thing, expand. Expand is a really great way for you to get rid of something that's clipping, or for dark areas being completely black. Here's the thing. Usually you would use expand with this feature right here, which is our show or hide clipping. Here's the thing about this, and I'm pretty sure this is a bug that they're gonna fix like pretty quickly. Actually, I'm gonna go back to my black points, like put it way down, right? Just for the sake of the example. I'm gonna go back and click that. I'm very obviously clipping right here. Alternatively, I'm gonna go back to my white point and just increase that for the sake of the example. This looks absolutely horrible, by the way. I'm gonna go back to my clipping. We're very obviously clipping. I click that, nothing happens. But as soon as you touch the control, look what happens. Oh, and it suddenly clicks in, right? So the thing that I noticed with the clipping tool is that, and you can see that when I turn that off, nothing really happens. I would again need to I turn that off, manipulate a tool, and then it goes back off. Here's the thing with this tool, just in order for this to initiate, you have to turn that on, and then you can manipulate your sliders and then it will show up. Pretty sure this is a bug. This is not supposed to be working that way, but this is what I've noticed. So black point and white point, we can see that nothing is really clipping at the brightest portion of the image, but you can see we have some trouble areas in the darker portions. And usually I would just go back to my black point and I would kind of decrease that, which will lift up some of the shadows and get rid of the clipping in the darker portions, which is great. That's looking great. Of course, we lost a little bit of that contrast, but we're gonna manipulate it a little bit later in a very cool way that I'm gonna show to you. Print is the profile that you can choose, which is gonna give you a kind of like a different look. I found that glossy paper works in 99% of the scenarios for me. I don't really know the difference between manipulating target white, which is basically white balance, exposure, tonal contrast, color density, and saturation in your profile tab or in your print tab, and going into your raw settings, for example, doing the same thing here. I'm pretty sure that whatever happens is there's some kind of mathematical equation being applied at a different level, some kind of different evaluation being applied, and gives you different results for whether or not you apply it in your profile, in your print, or going back to your raw settings or doing that elsewhere. I just end up not using print at all in that sense. I don't really use exposure, tonal contrast, or color density. By the way, actually, let me try and go ahead and bump up the color density, and also nothing is happening. I'm pretty sure I'm doing something wrong, but usually you would expect the things that are colorful in the frame to be dropped down in luminance, so they will start to appear a little bit darker than they are. But nothing is happening in this case. I might actually, no. If you take a look closely, because I'm looking at the trees right here, and I don't really see any difference in the adjustment. But if we look at this portion of the image right here, just bump it up. Can you see that? Just taking the slider left to right, and you can see that it's getting a little bit more colorful, but it's not really the color that is being pumped. It's because the exposure of these areas that are that have some color in it drop, and we know that the lower the exposure is, the more color you get in that area. And since we get the exposure down, it gets more saturated that way. Saturation, again, I would not really touch anything right here. I would just manipulate everything prior to this setting. Everything else past this point, I don't really use. I mean, I would use bloom is my favorite effect out of all, but color head I don't really touch at all because I don't know what that is. If you know what that is, it gives you more control over your image. If this is something you're into, you have that option right here. In my case, and I'm pretty sure in your case guys as well, for some people they're not gonna use some of the settings, or I'd like some settings to come before something else. I'd really love to see the option to rearrange some of the tools, or get rid of some of the tools, so the visibility, for example, for you to, or just there was an option for you to right click and say show overscan or show halation or show film grain, and you could just turn that off or on, or reorder, not just reposition this setting, put it on the left side. That's not what I'm talking about here, but just kind of reorder some of the tools so that it's more convenient for people to use. That would be great. I would really love for print and film profile to stand right next to each other, right as the kind of like the first thing that I do. I already told you that I like to dial in my overall look first, then I'll go back and manipulate the image on a more surgical level. So I would use my print and my film profile as kind of like the first step in the editing sequence. But right here, especially with all the tabs open, it kind of gets a little bit more complicated. Like you'll have to like go back and like manipulate it, especially with some of the things being repeated. Some of the settings, they do sound pretty similar to each other, like tonal contrast or contrast. And when you have all the tabs expanded like that, it's very easy for you to get lost in all the settings. So let's go over some of the effects that we have here. So we don't use color head. Film grain is great. But the thing with film grain, I like to go about grain and bloom and everything else and halation in terms of the kind of like the organic feel of it. So if I shot something on a 65mm ISO 250 and that has a specific kind of film grain that the guys back over at the Dehancer dialed in and they know what they're doing, I'm just gonna use 65 ISO 250. That's the attribute of this specific setting. If you like to see the grain that's a little bit larger in size, is like less resolution or it's affected less in midtones or whatever, you can do that. Me personally, I would just go back and say, oh, I'd like to use a 35mm ISO 50, for example. Like that looks great for me. Halation isn't something that I really like to use too often, but basically it adds, for the sake of the example, if you zoom in a little bit on this image, you can see that it adds this glow. You can see that it only happens in areas where you have the greatest contrast between the brightest portion of the frame and the darkest portion of the frame. And in these sections, you will have that effect being applied, which is pretty cool. Do I like seeing this? Yes or no. I don't really use that much. I've noticed I have some vintage lenses that have halation kind of going with them on the physical level, but adding them in post, not a fan of that. But if you want to, you can either use some of the presets that are available to you or use a custom mode to dial that in, especially with mask mode. You just slide that until you see where that effect is being applied, it's being highlighted. Go over to bloom. Bloom, however, on the other hand, is something that I use all the time. I really love to go just 8mm, which is like the strongest effect, because it gives my images this dreamy look. It lowers the contrast, it lowers the sharpness of the image a little bit, which in my case, along with the combination of grain, just works the best. So I'm gonna keep the bloom. I'm gonna go to film damage. Film damage, I don't really use. Overscan, the same as film damage. I don't really use overscan. I'm not sure what you would use overscan for, but if that's the effect you're going after, I'm not sure if that's just an aesthetics choice or is that something that you need for print or whatever. But yeah, that's also available to you. You can use one of the presets or dial it in manually. Vignette, also not a fan of using vignette. Not maybe in this particular case. Let's just go ahead and see what we can do here. The very thing that I like going about vignette is that I drop exposure all the way down, and then I go size, and I would just decrease the size and feather all the way down so I can see the preview. And this X, just on that deer, just gonna drop in size just like that and feather it just so we don't see whatever that's going on. I'd like to keep it at 50. My vignettes in every type of mask and any type of program, I keep it pretty feathered, so it's looking natural. And maybe we drop it down just like this, right? Before and after. Maybe that's a little bit dark. So before and after. And I think that looks pretty good. Now the output, the last thing on the list. This is also like very great. Every adjustment that you did prior to the setting, you can manipulate how much of the adjustment. For example, if I go to 0% and I go before and after, you will see that there is no difference. Everything that I've done here is not being applied at all. It's being at 0. But if I go back and like, oh, maybe I don't like 100% of what I've done, maybe like take all of that and split it in half, and I only like to use 50% of that. But in my case, I'm gonna go all the way to 100. But it's also interesting because in your film strip, you can not only see whatever photos you have in your project, but you just basically right click on the photo that you edited, and there is an option to apply to film strip. And when you click that, you can see that all the photos in my project, in my film strip, the same kind of adjustment that I applied to this photo is being applied to every other photo in the film strip, which is really cool. which is really cool. Instead of you going back to every photo, it's just, okay, let me do this manually. Let's add this preset. Let's turn this off. Let's manipulate it in any other way. The only thing that I have to do when I go back to the other image, and I like to see the effect that I like being applied, especially like in this image right here, before and after this looks good. Maybe I lost some of the color separation because of the temperature adjustment. The only thing I'll have to do, I'll have to back to my exposure, or maybe not exposure, but temperature, just dial it back a little bit. So that's really helpful in that case. Also, the more interesting thing that you can do here in the film strip, whenever you did any adjustment, and maybe you say, hey, I may have went a little bit loose on the contrast. Maybe I'd like to get a little bit more contrast, but I'm not sure if it's gonna look good. And I don't really want to, dial in contrast. Maybe I'd like to add something else, and just, there's no way for you to compare the versions. This film strip allows you to do exactly that. Maybe not the film strip, but something that's called snapshots on the left-hand side. And it's really cool. Let me show you what it does. I may look at this image like, I'm pretty happy with what I got. Maybe I'd like to use a little bit more contrast on here, right? But I don't want to go to my contrast and do it here. I can just right-click on the photo in my film strip and click Add Snapshot. And it kind of take this screenshot of whatever adjustment you've done to this image. And then, like for example, I want to drop certain adjustments and see what it looks like in a different way. I will like bump up my exposure. Maybe I'll go back to film compression. Maybe I'd like to bump it up even more. I can again right click, add snapshot, and it takes the screenshot of whatever adjustment I've made, and I can compare the two versions with multiple adjustments, and I can just keep doing that and comparing that and choosing whatever that works best for this particular shot. This is what you can do to compare different kind of versions. You can also do that with film presets to compare different film presets, and maybe you turn this off. In my case, I would turn everything off and it'll compare two different film presets, and to see whatever works best in my case. Here's the thing, while this is great, say I'm in a situation where I have the same shot of the deer, but from 3 different angles, and I have all of those 3 different angles in my film strip, and I would only love to apply that same adjustment. I would really love to apply that thing to only 3 other different photos. And I told you previously that you can't really select photos. I'm holding down Control or Command in my case, or like Shift. You can select multiple photos or anything. You cannot apply this edit to only a select number of photos in your film strip. You can only right click and apply it to all the film strip, which in my case, exactly why it doesn't really work, because I may have shot some of the photos in one location, and maybe this adjustment doesn't really work. Like for this particular shot, maybe I'd like to use a different kind of thing. This is the case right here. Maybe if they could implement a feature where you could select a number of photos which you know are shot with the same exposure, where that preset, everything you've done is basically going to work for everything else, and you're sure, you could just select that, just click Shift, select everything, and just apply to select it, and that would be great. So yeah, whenever we are happy, in my case, I'm not gonna go over and edit all the photos to save you a little bit more time. You would just go to, not apply, it's a different thing. I'm gonna tell you what that is a little bit later. We would go to this icon, click on it, and this is exactly what we want. We can either export current image and export all film strip images. Again, the same logic being applied here. I would love to see a feature which allowed you to select certain images. Maybe your client told you like, hey, could you please like send me off like 3 photos of this particular person? I just want to look at what you got cooking. You can't really do that. So you could only go ahead, export all film strip images. We can see the source. We're going to select the destination. In my case, it's going to be desktop, export. I'm going to create a new folder. We're going to go here, open that. And we have an option to choose file format, which is JPEG or TIFF, and quality. Say we're in a position where we want to upload our footage, our photos to Instagram. We know Instagram compresses something over a certain resolution, right? I would really love to see the box where you could type in and dial in a specific resolution along with the aspect ratio. So for example, I'd really love to see the aspect ratio like 4:3 and drop down the resolution, because I know I'm going to be uploading that to Instagram, and I know that Instagram is going to compress my photos using its own compression algorithm, and I don't want it to do that. So I'll just drop down and dial in the exact resolution for Instagram to not do that. We don't have that option right here. Say you're in the different situation where you work with a client. My client told me, hey, I only need photos that are not over a certain size, right? I don't want photos that are over like 5 megabytes, for example. I would really love to see the kind of pre-evaluation of what of the size of a certain image after the export. It's really helpful to see the estimated file size right here, and maybe when you drop down the quality, you would also see that being displayed in the corner somewhere. But anyway, in our case, we're going to click Start Processing, and the program is going to process all the images, and the export complete. It pretty much took me like 10 to 15 seconds to complete the process. So I'm going to click Reveal Destination Folder. It's going to display the folder with all the photos. We can preview them. Everything that's being manipulated is being displayed over here, which I am pretty happy with the results that I got. I'm going to go back to our software. Let's go back to our film presets. Right now, I'm just going to select Dehancer, all films, so I can see a little bit better what's going on. And I can't really quickly tell you what preset I am on. Like, I want to add it to favorites. The only way for me to do that is manually match the name to the name of the preset, and kind of like, oh, maybe I'd like to go here and edit to favorites. I would, again, really love to see the selection being available and being there at all times. Maybe the selection would be in a more contrasty color. Like for example, right now we're in a gray background. I would really love the selection to not be dark, but being kind of framed in a white frame, or being out in this white outline would be a little bit better. But anyway, another thing though, for some people, they really love a different background for editing their photos. Some people prefer a white background, some people prefer a gray background, some people prefer a black, dark background. If the Dehancer team could maybe implement the ability to apply a different background, switch it to white, that would be good. Okay, that'll be it for this review. Overall, to kind of sum it up, what I always liked is that Dehancer has always been a great way to bring this analog feel and character into your images in a way that kind of feels mature, natural, and just not overdone. I guess what kind of separates it from using just another LUT or like a preset or whatever. And now with the direction that they're going with the organization and the sorting system and everything, it just makes it a little bit more mature in that regard. Well, there are definitely things I'd love to see improved and polished a little bit further, especially in terms of workflow flexibility and just quality of life things. But overall, the foundation is really strong. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. And again, if you want to check out Dehancer for yourself, the link will be in the description down below. See you guys in the next one.